to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
The state of Idaho wants Bryan Kohberger barred from contacting the victims' families for the next 99 years. And no, that is not a typo. Prosecutors are seeking a near century-long no-contact order against the accused, now admitted Idaho killer. What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. This is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime. Tonight, we're looking ahead, obviously, to tomorrow early morning. Yours truly is going to have to be online at about 3 a.m. To get into perhaps the most notorious sentencing in certainly the last decade or so, as Bryan Kohberger will face not only Judge Stephen Hipler, but also all of the families, most of the families. We'll get some updates from Kevin Fixler in just a moment. And why don't I do that and bring him in right now? Y'all know Kevin Fixler, investigative reporter for the Idaho Statesman. That has been the paper of record for this story. And Kevin is their lead reporter and a three-time Idaho Reporter of the Year. Next up, Troy Lambert. He joined us back at the very beginning of this horrific story. He's back tonight. He's an Idaho-based freelance writer, a mystery author, a multi-genre editor, and a nonfiction author and ghostwriter. He has a wealth of experience and knowledge. He also writes for Unbound Northwest. He's the author of the popular Max Boucher Murder Mysteries series, Max Boucher Murder Mysteries, and his son, or stepson, I believe, was at the University of Idaho at the time of the murders. And Gemma Gaudet is joining us as well. The last time we talked to her, she was hosting the award-winning public radio show Idaho Matters, and it is a bittersweet reunion here, coming back to the people we were talking to in the early days of this horrific crime that has now been admitted to by Bryan Kohberger. And yes, I just got back from the IMSI, otherwise known as the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. It was an unbelievable tour. Shout out to the warden there, Randy Valley, a great guy. And I'll tell you about that in just a few moments. But all you have to know, and all you have to let Carm and the COE know, is that I survived. Kevin Fixler, always in the mountainish looking plaid shirt, the rugged, handsome Idaho Statesman reporter. Fix, I didn't get to see you last night, but maybe this morning. What's the latest over the last? I've been out of pocket at this prison. Any late breaking news? I just saw this no contact order. He is going to be forbidden, Bryan Kohberger, from contacting any family members for the next 100 years, 99 to be precise.
That filing from the state posted yesterday, and though it has not been granted by the judge, we can anticipate that it will, of course. There'd be no reason not to. In terms of other breaking news, no, it's as the world turns and awaits the Super Bowl of sentencing for the state of Idaho, which is tomorrow bright and early. We'll all be waiting in line if we're trying to get in. Yeah.
So Gemma, let me go to you. Let us know if you're still hosting the same show. And I apologize, I didn't get a chance to say hello before we went on air. But your bird's eye view reaction to this, obviously, since the last time we talked, I don't even know if Bryan Kohberger had been arrested, but it was around that time. Fast forward 2.5, almost 3 years later, and suddenly he has cut this plea deal, and tomorrow there will be sentencing. Your reaction to all that?
Yeah, so I am still hosting Idaho Matters, and we've actually had Kevin on quite a bit since he is the truly go-to reporter for this entire case. I wasn't surprised by the plea deal in the sense that I think in big cases like this, there tend to be plea deals, right? And so not surprised by that. Still, at the same time, I think we were all gearing up for this trial. all assuming that there would be a trial. So I think there was surprise in the sense that it happened so quickly, and then there was a hearing that happened so quickly, right? And so here we are tomorrow, and I think there's a lot of wondering, well, okay, are we going to finally learn anything in tomorrow's sentencing hearing?
And Gemma, what's your best guess? Do you think we hear from Bryan Kohberger, and to what degree if we do?
I don't think we hear from him. I mean, let's be honest, he doesn't even have to show up. There's nothing that says he even has to be at the sentencing hearing. I think he'll be there. I think if anything were to surprise me, it would be if he actually speaks tomorrow.
Troy, to you, I mean, you write murder mysteries, mystery stories. Kohberger and Ann Taylor, according to Jody Arrington, knew they had no chance, which I think is right. This story, Troy, is almost unbelievable in the different layers and textures that it contains. It has everything except the trial now. To you, I guess, and I once used the word fascinated with Nancy Grace, who yelled at me, but I don't mean it in sort of a positive light, but in a more morbid, macabre sense. What has fascinated you the most about this case up to this point?
I think what's most fascinating is the fact that at least it appears that if we hadn't caught him this time, he would have done this again. He was studying, and I think to a certain extent, modern technology is what allowed us to do this. But I think also the surprise of it was that for somebody who studied as well as he did, that he'd left evidence at the scene clearly, and that he made some what I would call tactical mistakes, which sounds absolutely terrible when you're talking about something like this, but that he made some what I would call amateur mistakes in the way that he committed these crimes. And maybe in some ways, some of the scouting he did too, although part of it for me is I am like Kevin, like I want to see some of this evidence that they have, because I'm really interested in like how he messed up, and how that we got this solidified. But to me, it's fascinating that he, as someone who studied this as well as he did, that he made some mistakes that to me seem like you should have known better. But I wish that we would hear from him. But I'm like Gemma too. I don't think we'll hear from him at all ever. I just don't think he's going to talk.
Can I hop into that? I mean, Troy, what you said about he would have done this again if not caught, I 100% agree with you. I think this, frankly, could have ended up being a serial killer. And I don't say that lightly, but I think that there are all of the signs to that. And having gone to college at Washington State University, I know that area very, very well. I mean, I think, speculating here, maybe it was let's see if this works the first time. Let's see if I can get away with this. And if he could have, I think this would have been an even more horrific crime spree, if we can even wrap our heads around that.
Absolutely. If he'd gotten away with it once, it would have been game on. I think this was practice, quite honestly. And thank goodness it failed.
Yeah. By the way, huge shout out to Christina, if you're listening, and I think she is, the mother of Doug, the emotional support dog, Great Dane. She actually took me out to the prison. She offered to wait online for me tonight, beginning at like 1 a.m. Fix scared me to death because he says they're kicking line waiters to the side and you have to go back to the end of the line. So yours truly will not be a prima donna, and I will be waiting online probably beginning at 3 a.m. And I will hold a spot for Fix, because Fix is going to be on Fox. Fix, Fox. But Fixler, to you, any late breaking news that you need to catch us up on that has transpired over the last bunch of hours, or are we kind of just in a waiting game right now for the sentencing hearing tomorrow?
Yeah, we're in a holding pattern. And I think what we've hoped for in the media is a list of the victims' family members who may speak, but that has not been provided by the court to this point. We have indications that the Chapins will not be attending, but that doesn't mean they won't send a statement ahead, and perhaps that would be read by a victim's advocate. We do anticipate the members of at least the other three families to be there. There's also questions as to whether or not the two surviving roommates might also be in attendance. One of them did attend the plea hearing. I did not see the other, who lives in Las Vegas, but it is possible they could be there tomorrow. But yeah, as far as other news or information, not particularly. I think we know what we're stepping into tomorrow. We'll anticipate that these will be tough conversations. These will be the first opportunities for family members to speak their minds publicly, at least in court, and direct their comments directly at the man who has admitted to killing their loved ones.
Yeah, and Fix, just to dot some I's and cross some T's, I think I had read that the Chapin family planned to skip sentencing and instead spend the day on a lake. Everyone else was planning to come out. Is that, as far as you know, is that still the case?
Yeah, the Chapins own a second home on Priest Lake up north, and that's where Ethan and their other two children had spent a lot of their days jet skiing and those types of sports. So they intend to be out there. That's what they told NBC, unless we hear something otherwise. But I have seen that our local affiliate KTVB is reporting that the mother of Xana Kernodle will be in attendance. This will be for her first hearing, as far as I know. And we can also expect the Gonsalves family to be there in full force. There was some talk initially that perhaps they wouldn't attend at all. Steve Gonsalves boycotted the plea hearing over the family's anger over the plea deal. And we can anticipate also the Laramies, that is the mother and stepfather of Madison Mogen. And my understanding from prior conversations with Ben Mogen, her father, is that he would also attend, but I have not been able to confirm that at this point.
Yeah. Gemma, just back to you. Obviously, Steve Gonsalves has been really outspoken. The Kernodles have been outspoken now about this plea deal, not wanting it after just leaving within the last 45 minutes, getting a tour of IMSI, which is the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. And this is not in any way to undermine what Steve Gonsalves is saying, because trust me, if I was in his position, I'm sure I would want the exact same thing. But the thought of what I just saw and having that be your life for the rest of your time on planet Earth, for me, it would be a toss-up between standing in front of the firing squad and doing the sort of the mindless daily routines that these people were doing that I just witnessed. But to that point, I am tense thinking about Steve Gonsalves being in a courtroom tomorrow with Bryan Kohberger. I have no doubt that he's going to, be able to restrain himself. But how, I guess, how I feel like you can cut the tension with a knife. What do you think the atmosphere is going to be like in there tomorrow?
I think you're right. I mean, I think it is going to be tense, right? I think it's going to be highly emotional. How can it not be? With that said, I think, when we look at Judge Hipler, he's run a very tight ship during all of these hearings. And I think that if he were to see or believe that anyone who's giving a statement is out of line, is being aggressive, I could see him very much making sure that that person is, put in their place, in the sense of, it doesn't matter how emotional you are, he's going to make sure that nothing gets out of hand in that courtroom tomorrow. But to your point, I mean, I think it's going to be highly charged, highly emotional, and in particular, probably with Kaylee's family and how outspoken they've been about this. I mean, I think about the grieving process that they're going through, and we all grieve incredibly differently. And I think that it's fair to say that their grief has definitely come out in the way that it's come out. And at the same time, if there had been a trial, maybe there would be some answers, and they may never get the answers that they want. So then you have to, for the rest of your life as her parents, you have questions that'll never get answered. So I don't think there's any place to make judgments on any of these families and how they are dealing with their grief and moving through this.
I got to tell you, I'm a little thrown off just having you guys all know I'm terrified of prison. And just having gone through the halls with some of Kevin Fixler's colleagues, by the way, and Brian Etten, shout out to Brian, who's a friend of mine and a good friend of the COEs. He was there as well. That guy never stops working. And I'll get into it, I promise, in a few minutes about what we saw. But again, someone made the point, the reason I bring it up again, Thriller Reader here says, and by the way, the COE is working to put something together as we speak that will probably air later tonight about this tour that we just got. But someone said Bryan Kohberger, Troy, is going to adjust fairly well to prison because he is not a human of the same kind that we all are. And maybe there's something to that. We were on or inside B block, which is the most restrictive of the blocks at IMSI. I thought that everyone was out on the yard, and it turned out that they were not. It was, a pin could drop, but it was that they're all locked in their cells all day long. And when I came to that realization and the warden let me know that, I was like, wow, I would absolutely. It is amazing what we all take for granted, having freedom. These people are literally locked away most dogs, the majority of dogs and cats in America live much better lives, I would say, and probably the squirrels and the raccoons. Mm-hmm. So it is nothing that I envy. With all that said, to you, Troy, what you said off the top about wanting to see the evidence, are there certain specific things that you are interested in unpacking kind of specifically that you're hoping that is made public?
Well, my primary thing is motive, because I would totally agree with this commenter. First of all, I've toured that prison. I've toured Snake River Correctional Institute in Oregon, which is right across the border as well. And those guys are in that segregation. They're in their cells 23 hours a day and get 1 hour out. Is not an existence that I would want. But I have good friends that work at Snake River, and they do tell me those guys adjust. They don't that becomes their home, and it becomes normal to them, and some of them just find a way to make their lives into something decent because they're not like you and I. Like they don't, that obviously prison was a consideration when he went into that thing. But anyway, as far as the evidence is concerned, my primary thing that I always focus on is motive, because the deal with fiction compared to real life is fiction has to make sense. So somehow I have to make a motive make sense. Otherwise, a book doesn't make any sense, right? But in this case, we don't really have a motive. And I found it interesting when the prosecutor was talking about there's no sexual component to this. And I'm like, there might have not been anything at the scene, but sexual components is almost always a motive. Was there a single target? And the truth is, even if it went to trial, we may never have gotten that information. Kohberger may never speak out. We may never know what his motive was and what his reasons behind it were. But for me, that's what I would like to know more about. Now, I'd also like to know about this, social media presence and all the other things that people are talking about. But for me, that core motive of why is one of the things I would really like to know. And I'd like to know if the prosecutor has come across anything that answers that question of why. That's the evidence that I'd really like to see.
Yeah, and that speaks directly, Fix, just back to you and then back to Gemma. But Fix, the gag order, of course, was lifted. Has that affected you in a good way or impacted you in a good way since that has happened? Have you found it easier to get information as a result?
Lightly so far, and that's because the state was actually the side that asked Judge Hipler to maintain the non-dissemination order through sentencing, and then a coalition of media organizations, including the Idaho Statesman, filed a suit and asked that it be dropped, that there was no justification for this. Judge Hipler ultimately agreed, but in that interim, the state agreed that they were going to withdraw it. They changed their minds, essentially. And then Bryan Kohberger's defense filed and objected where they had not before. So thus far, what Bill Thompson, the prosecutor, did was he put out a memo 2 days before he submitted that, and told all of law enforcement, the agents of the prosecution, not to speak before sentencing. So while there is no gag order in effect currently, there essentially still is on that side. And whether it's the FBI or Idaho State Police or Moscow PD, and there's been some, light information that's kind of come out since for journalists. And I can tell you, we got our phones constantly running, and it's ringing off the hook for, I'm sure, some of the key figures here. But so far, really, nobody has broke. And I think we'll start to see that. We will see the dam break after sentencing, including with Bill Thompson.
Yeah, tomorrow could end up being a really busy day, and I'm preparing for no sleep. I'm going to try to get a cat nap right after this, and then I'm going to probably hold a spot, like I said, for Fix, who's doing something for Fox News at like 3 a.m. where we are. So it's going to be an early day and a long day for us tomorrow. But the reason I'm out here, aside from just being fascinated by this case and having a true crime podcast, is you always, and Gemma, I know you know this, having been a local reporter and hosting your own show, as does Fix, is that you get information that you're just never going to get. And I'll tell you a quick little story. And after I do, I know where Fixler is going to say he wants to eat tonight. But last night I met Josh Ritter, a good friend who hosts Courtroom Confidential. We went to dinner, and I honestly, what's the name of that place, Fix?
You went to Chandler's, a steakhouse.
Oh, you went to Chandler's. Fancy.
Oh. Yeah, he is fancy.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I didn't know where I was going, but that's where I went. So now I probably shouldn't share the story, but I'm going to. So a person that will remain unnamed, who is a hostess there, I get nervous for everything, but in Boise, I get nervous because people are nice. Like, I checked into my hotel, and the guy behind the front desk was like, I'm going to walk you to the elevator. And I was like, what does this guy want from me? But he just wanted to be nice. As a guy born in New Jersey who lived in New York, LA, DC, and now Miami, I don't generally trust people. But people here are genuinely nice. So we get seated by the hostess last night at this restaurant in Boise, and she was super friendly and super sweet. And she reminded me of Kaylee and Maddie, almost like a mix, and didn't think anything of it. And then toward the end of the meal, Josh and I were just settling up the bill. He did not treat. I didn't treat either. And long story short, I said to her, are there a lot of people in town for Bryan Kohberger? And she like looked at me, and I was like, oh, wow, she's never heard of him. And I was like, do you know who he is? And she's like, there you go, Courtroom Confidential, spending that out of town money. So she says to us, I knew Kaylee and Maddie really, really well. And my best friend is Jack Showalter, the guy that some people thought did this. And I realized what a small community this is at that point. So, most obnoxious reporters would just be pressing her like, can you connect me to him? But I don't have that in me anymore. And Fix is still a young buck, so that's why I think
don't sell yourself short, Joel.
That's why I think Fix is going to be at Chandler's tonight. But the long story short is
you
that
I'll come if you're buying.
Yeah,
in Chandler's, nobody buys at Chandler's. They always split that check.
You split that.
You always split that check.
But the moral of the story is, she said to me that Jack, who's literally her best friend, is, had a super hard time. He had to drop out of school. He's just trying to get his life back together. And it made me realize the impact of this. And I even asked her, I said, before Bryan Kohberger was in custody, did you have a moment where you thought your best friend could have done this because the rest of the world did? And she honestly said, we thought about it and it was really uncomfortable. But Gemma, it just goes to show you what a small community this is, what a tight-knit community this is, that just a random person to me who seats us at a restaurant has these many connections. And this is the story of a lifetime. This is, I knew Maddie, I knew Kaylee, I'm friends with Jack, and this poor guy he comes from a prominent family here. And if you remember, he, escaped to Africa for a while. But the point is, the victims here, there's just such a ripple effect, and he happens to be one of them. Even this hostess is. So just speak to the effect, I guess, on the community, not just in Moscow, but down here in Boise as well.
Well, I think this is something that I even talked about the very first time I came on 2.5-3 years ago. Is I think one of the reasons why this case has captured people so much is that Idaho is small, right? It's 2 million people in the entire state. University of Idaho is not only one of the largest higher education institutions, it's the legacy institution, right? So you have generations of families that have been there. And I think it seems like everyone knows someone in some sense who is connected to this, right? Just like how you had that meeting with the hostess at the restaurant last night. My husband during law school lived on King Road. He studied in that house on King Road all of the time. I mean, the people who lived in that house when he was studying he was one of our groomsmen in our wedding, right? And then from there, I have numerous friends who have children at the University of Idaho that are in the Greek system, in the same house as these girls were, right? Knew of them. The principal at one of my son's schools, their daughter knew someone very, very well, one of the victims very well. There is this ripple effect of everyone having some type of connection, even if they didn't have a personal connection to the victims. You have a personal connection somehow to Moscow, Idaho. And that is just because of the legacy of this institution. I mean, in fact, I was flying home last night, and I'm in Seattle, flying home to Boise, and all of these people come on with all their Vandal sweatshirts on, right? And you just see that all of the time. So there is this ripple effect. And I think, Kevin, you and I have even chatted about this before, is like, what is it that has made this case so compelling? And I really do think it's just that everyone seems to have some type of connection. Now, with that said, there are people who have never heard about it, because I think that these are people who choose not to, ingest news. So there is that too. With that said, I think overall, we are a small community, and it happened at an institution that everyone is aware of.
Great point. And Great Dane mom, again, person, literally a stranger to me, who happened to, she got speaking of a small community, she moved here, I think I can say this, from Vegas, has been out here for over 20 years. And when this crime happened, she was never into true crime, but she said she started watching Surviving the Survivor and a few other podcasts that are not as good. And except for Josh Ritter's, I'm joking. But anyway, she said that she just got fixated on this case. And out of the blue, she literally offered, I did not have a rental car because the courthouse is 2 blocks away, said, hey, I'm going to come pick you up and take you. And then she gave me a chair to sit outside the courthouse. So Christina, I will not give her last name, and Doug, it was amazing to meet you. And by the way, Doug, the Great Dane, is an emotional support animal. And he was hanging out with some of the corrections officers who needed to hang with Doug today. So Doug actually was put to work, and those COs know that Bryan Kohberger, and by the way, they are not publicly saying that he's for sure going to this facility, but there's really no other facility for him to go to. So Doug, actually, not only are the people cool, but the dogs are super cool, and they were helping out the corrections officers today. So Fix, back to, I think that probably the most salient point made so far is what Troy said about, when he writes a murder mystery, there's got to be a motive. Otherwise, the book doesn't make sense. And we don't have that. So in terms of evidence, Kevin, for a guy like you that's been all over every story related to this case, literally, what are you most interested in unraveling? If you had your druthers and you could get any bit of information you wanted, I guess if you could wave your magic wand, what would it be? Would it be the motive?
Yeah, I hate to sound redundant, but Troy's got it. And I run a Facebook page about this case with Mike Baker from the New York Times. And I ran a poll actually with, we have a small group. It's not anything like the big Facebook case page, but about 35 or 3,600 people. And of that poll, the majority, it was about 45% of people said that if they could have one piece of information out of this case that they don't yet know, they wanted to know the why, which is the motive. The other things that I had suggested were things like whose DNA was on the handrail, or the blood on the glove that was found outside. Obviously, the location of the murder weapon is something I think people have a lot of curiosity about. Police early in had said that the crime was targeted, but didn't know whether, and then there was backtracking about that among a number of elected officials. Was it the home that was targeted? Was it a specific individual? We still don't really have that information, and that obviously ports over to the why and the motive as well. But there's a handful of these things. For those who have followed the case, what was Bryan Kohberger Papa Roger on the Facebook group?
Yeah.
We want to know. And so there's a handful of these things that police, law enforcement, investigators, they probably have some inklings. They may not know definitively, but as Bill Thompson said at the plea hearing, they didn't find the knife, but he did indicate and started to talk about the confluence of two rivers up in the Lewiston-Clarkston area. He didn't say that's what they thought, but he indicated, and you could infer that was where they believed that he may have dumped the knife. So there's a number of these pieces, but I can tell you that the why is what people still can't wrap their head around.
Yep.
And I think to add on to that is that, as normal functioning individuals, we always want that why. We want to wrap that bow on it, right? We want to make it make sense. And we have to remember, we're not dealing with a person who thinks like the rest of us. So therefore, even if we found out the why may never make sense to us, because we're not dealing with someone who lives in society and functions in society like the rest of us. So would knowing the motive help? I mean, at least you would know, but I don't know if it would make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. It might not make any sense. We'll get into the, whether he was targeting someone, your thoughts on that. But first, Snap Happy here with a super chat. Fix, I'm going to toss this to you. I'm concerned there's something going on in the background that the prosecution feels that BK is going to contact the families. Is it normal that this sort of 100-year restriction would be put in place? And I'll caveat that, Fix, by asking you, have there been any that we know of? Have there been any previous attempts or prior attempts by Kohberger to reach out to the victims' families from jail that you know of?
Not that we're aware of, but he's actually already under that restriction. It's just that the current one goes through, I think it was, jogging my memory here, I think it's June of 27. And so they are just extending that in perpetuity, essentially. Gemma might have some idea, actually better than I, about whether or not these are standard in these types of life imprisonment situations. I'm actually a little bit less familiar. I'm not typically a courts reporter, but this is a case that I have, and I guess Troy is nodding yes, but this is the biggest case I've ever covered like this. I'm not a legal eagle, but I've had to become one by following this case over the last 2.5+ years.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gemma.
I was going to say, I think they're not untypical, right? I mean, the other thing is too, so we have to remember that, and I believe this is a federal law, correct me if I'm wrong, but like he will never be able to make money off of this, right? Mm-hmm. So if for some reason he decides he wants to tell his side of the story and he decides he's going to write a book, well, how the law works is all of that money will go to the victims. So he cannot profit on this at all. I think that's really important that people understand that. And to my knowledge, he's not tried to contact the family members, but this could just be preemptive so that he cannot.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that, Troy? Because you were nodding your head in agreement.
No, just quickly, that one of the things we have to remember too is this is not a typical case. Like there's not just a lot of these laying around, especially in Idaho. But I think that it's very typical for the families to ask for something like that. In this particular case, especially when you have young people, and he's fairly young, is they really want to protect the family and the family's families that are yet to be even born. Because with social media and all that, can he create a fake account? Can he get in touch with somebody? Weird stuff like that, even from prison. Well, yeah, these guys are clever. They can do all kinds of stuff. So I don't think it's atypical at all. I wouldn't know that it's like 100% of the time in these type of cases, but these cases are so rare, it's really hard to say, like, is this 100% of the time? But I don't think it's unusual at all.
Yeah. There was just a comment up, Gemma, about the plea deal. I don't want to, make it personal from your end, but I'm just curious, as an Idahoan, are you, and Troy, you can get, take a turn right after Gemma, but do you think it was the right decision in your eyes to just cut the deal?
I don't know if it was the right decision or the wrong decision. I think it was probably the best decision. And what I mean by that is, and I want to make it very clear, I can understand why there are some families who completely disagree with this, right? With that said, when I took a step back and I thought about this more, I didn't think just of the four families. I thought of the two surviving victims. They're victims. They have to live the remainder of their lives with this. If he had gone to trial, and now there's also assumption that he would have been found guilty, that the jury would have given him the death penalty. None of that is for sure. This is a for sure thing. He is going to prison for the rest of his natural life. He cannot appeal. So when I think of these two young women, they don't have to show up for any appeals hearings. They don't have to continue to be reminded of this. I mean, of course they will for the rest of their lives, but hopefully they will be able to move forward and try to live their lives outside of having to constantly be reminded of this. And even with the families, again, you don't have to keep showing up for appeals hearings. You don't have to continue to be constantly involved with this individual. Maybe that will give some people some sense of peace. And Troy, I see you nodding, so I'm curious about what you think about it too, because I do. I think about these two young women. They are victims in this case, and I think sometimes we have forgotten that.
Yeah, and by the way, Troy, before you answer, I was with Great Dane Mom, like I said, most of the day. And again, we're driving and she just points out the window. She goes, such and such surviving room. One of the surviving roommates lives right there. And people here know her and know what she's been through. And she is suffering. I mean, she's going through trauma therapy. And to Gemma's point, she's going to be doing that probably for the foreseeable future. So it is much different, I have to say, talking about this from my glorified walk-in closet in Miami to being here in Boise and seeing the actual people who are affected by this. So, but Troy, to you, what about the deal? The deal itself, was it a smart decision, bad decision, decision you can't really, weigh one way or the other?
I would say it was a decision, but I, in some ways, I think it's a good decision. I'm like Gemma. I think it's a good decision for the victims, the surviving victims, and likely for their families as well. Now, I would have liked to see as part of that deal, like an allocution, he has to tell us what he did. I would really have liked to see that, but I'm not in the legal side of it. So, they had to figure that out. So I would have liked to see that as part of the plea deal, but I think not going to trial is probably a better move. It's easier on the families. It's easier on the community. And it's exactly like Gemma says too, there's no guarantees that he would be convicted. There's no guarantees that he'd be sentenced to death. At least now we know he'll spend the rest of his life in prison, and likely, right down the road in a prison that's actually, frankly, pretty terrible. Like you saw, a pretty terrible place to be. And whether he adjusts to that or not, he still has to spend the rest of his life there. And he's a young man, and he's going to die there, and one way or another. And in some ways, living that whole time is probably greater suffering for him than in Idaho now, standing in front of a firing squad, and the families having to see that on top of all the other things that they've seen. So I think the plea deal is a good decision. I think it's a solid decision, but I can see why people are upset about not having the trial and not making him go through that process. So I see both sides of it, but personally, I think that the plea deal was a good decision.
There you
Joel,
go. Yeah, jump in, Fix.
I won't take a side on this, but I'll just point out that initially we had an understanding that the four families were split, that two really wanted a trial and the death penalty, and two supported the decision. But we have now, in recent weeks, actually it was Fox News reporter Michael Ruiz who first reported that Xana's mother is on the side of supporting this deal, whereas Xana's father is not. So that family is split itself. And so you essentially have members of three families in support of this, and I guess you have members of two families who do not.
Yeah. And thanks for pointing that out, because you hear the Kernodals are against it, but to Fix's point, they are split themselves. The quiet fringe here, and looking ahead for tomorrow, Thursday, what are the chances that Judge Hipler's tone will be less respectful, kind to BK? I felt for the fan. So Fix, during the plea hearing, Kohberger went to stand and the judge was like, "Oh no, you don't need to stand." And I said this on the show last night, like, treat this guy like the murderer, quadruple murderer that he is, make him stand up, make him show respect. Do you think we'll see a different tone from Judge Hipler? I know you wrote a profile of him that just appeared in the Idaho Statesman, not about Kohberger, but Hipler. What don't we know about Hipler that you want to tell us? I read that he's a devout Catholic who's anti-death penalty, but obviously he doesn't show it. But what did you learn about Hipler that's interesting, and will he change his tone tomorrow?
Well, we don't know where Judge Hipler personally stands on the death penalty, just to clarify. He has raised his children and come up through the local Catholic high school and middle school, and the Catholic Church is adamantly against the death penalty. But if Judge Hipler is against it, he has not come forward and said any such thing. But in terms of his demeanor, I think everybody saw a stark contrast between himself and Judge Judge, who was previously overseeing the case up in Moscow. Just totally different tones and demeanors. And we're at a different stage of the case and building toward the trial during the pretrial phase. We did see Judge Hipler very professionally throughout, in my opinion, but handle this case. Tons of public scrutiny, tons of pressure, tons of attention. He's very aware of the national stage that he has whenever he puts them on the record for the live stream. And he has taken opportunities to try to educate in some ways about the criminal justice system, including at the plea hearing, and explaining that he had no ability to force the state to seek the death penalty, as an example. But as far as the difference between the plea hearing, which I attended, and what we can anticipate at sentencing, I think he will roll out the red carpet for the families and make that the focus, obviously. But I think when Judge Hipler is given his opportunity to explain why he is going to be sentencing Bryan Kohberger to life imprisonment, he is going to lean in. That is his MO. That is his identity, according to attorneys I spoke to for that profile. And I think we can anticipate Judge Hipler is going to light him up.
I think he'll be. Yeah, I mean, I think that Hipler will be very firm, right? I think that you see that in his demeanor and everything. And back to Kevin's point, I mean, Hipler had no decision in this plea deal. And so then when he got, how many calls, hundreds of calls saying that he should do something about this, he can't. And I think it's really important that people understand how the law works. Judges don't have the kind of power that a lot of people assume that they have. And he has been, I think, very strict in that courtroom and will continue to be like that tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of people think that judges can wave a magic wand and make things happen, but they're just really the arbiters within the courtroom. Dana C here will continue to go around. I've got a bunch more questions, but I promise Fix we won't go a lot longer than 1 hour, because Fix is the VIP. Everyone wants Fix on their shows right now. Hi, Kevin from Dana C. Can you talk about your investigative reporting on Bill Thompson being in favor of plea deals over the death penalty throughout his career? I think you did a profile on the prosecutor. What did you find out? Yeah,
the three profiles I was producing in lead up to what we expected to be a trial. So I will tell you, these took massive revisions once there was significant development, clearly, with the plea deal. What I found, and the third is aside from Judge Hipler, it's Ann Taylor. I also did one about her as well. But in my research, I found that Bill Thompson had only prosecuted a single case and gotten that to the finish line in terms of the death penalty. He has handled multiple murder trials over his now 33 years in office. He's the longest serving active Idaho prosecutor elected here in our state. And he's the longest serving also current in Latah County. So it's not so much that he favors that per se, but it's just that he does have a history of pursuing a plea deal. And people say, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Bill Thompson has certainly seen the benefits of maybe saving people the personal turmoil. And we know there are incredible costs associated with the appeals processes. I don't know if they showed you death row while you were out there at IMSI, Joel, but we have prisoners there who have been there 50 years or several who have been there for 50 years. And just last year, they tried to execute someone, but failed in a lethal injection botch, and he lives on. So it's not so much the costs associated with being in prison and housing that person. It has to do with the appeals process and the attorneys and on and on. But to that person's question, yes, Bill Thompson has, over the course of his decades in office, sought plea deals rather than seeking the death penalty. And it's been effective in terms of getting either convictions or guilty pleas. And this is another example, even though it is he is facing a lot of scrutiny over it.
Well, and
by the way, real quick, Gemma, just shout out to Abby Crossing, who helps us behind the scenes, and she's been out of the chat for a while. She's back, and we love having her back. And then just to this point, real quick, and I promise, Gemma, I'm going to let you jump in. And Gemma, you might be able to jump in with this from Priola. What if self-publishing, because people are saying he can't profit, what if he just wants to self-publish so he can parade his story? That's as valuable. I mean, a judge can quash that, right? Troy's saying no. Troy,
Yeah,
what about?
well,
he can't profit from it.
He can't.
Yeah, he can't.
He can't profit from it.
But-
So
but can he-
Amazon or
but can
wherever
he
he
just-
tried to publish it,
Yeah.
he can't. He
What-
can gain no profit. Can he write
What
a
if
blog?
you just want?
Or-
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
He
but
can't
that
have.
would
He
be
can't,
also.
yeah, he can't have
He can't
any
monetize
money.
it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, he can't
Gemma,
monetize it.
Gemma,
Yeah.
go ahead with the comment that you were going to make, Gemma.
Oh, all I was going to say was adding on to what Kevin said is that when we look at prosecutors, I think overall in the state of Idaho, they all tend to try to work plea deals, from misdemeanor crimes to felony crimes. All you have to do is spend a day in the Ada County courthouse, and you will see that Ada County prosecutors want plea deals. So I don't think that this is something that is unique to Bill Thompson. I think it is how the prosecuting system in the state of Idaho tends to work more often than not. And that's just from someone who has covered the state of Idaho crime for more decades than I would like to admit.
Yeah, and Gemma, I think people's jaw dropped during the plea hearing because Judge Hipler, or I forget if it came out in the plea hearing or right afterwards, but essentially, in so many words, the plea deal is you're going to prison for the rest of your life. You are admitting to the murder of these 4 people, and you cannot file an appeal. But there's Garza versus Idaho, which allows for someone who is essentially saying that they're not going to be able to, for a deal where you're not able to file an appeal, to still be able to file an appeal. I don't think you're an attorney, but are you familiar with this? Oh, you're not.
I am not.
Troy,
I'm only married to one, so I know I know just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. Well, Fix, speak to that for a moment, Fix, because there is something called Garza versus Idaho, which essentially, even though the deal involves no possible kind of appeal, there's still the possibility of an appeal, right?
Yeah, and I've spoken to attorneys about this, and basically, and this was known. I know that people were shocked to hear this because it was part of the agreement. But the deal is that if you had ineffective counsel, it is one of the few pathways that Bryan Kohberger could file an appeal. It doesn't mean that the appeal would move through. It's that it's the most legitimate, or it's the only legitimate appeal he could file. And what he would be arguing is saying, look, I struck this deal. This is what I was told by my attorneys, my public defense team. I now realize that was bad advice. I should have never agreed to this. I should have taken it to trial. And I had ineffective counsel. And so you could file that through the state system. And then we have what's called a habeas corpus, which is out of the federal system. And you could also make that argument that I had ineffective assistance of counsel. I am appealing my guilty pleas, and I want a new opportunity at a trial. But the thing is, the signed agreement through the plea deal it doesn't restrict that opportunity, but it's going to make the appellate court system in Idaho, both the appellate court and the Supreme Court, look at that with a gimlet eye and say, no, you knew what you were doing. You were asked multiple times. You had not imbibed any substances. You said you were of sound mind. They went through, Judge Hipler did through all the questions. And that is going to restrict his ability. It doesn't mean he can't file it, but it means that the courts will look at that very skeptically and say, sure, you have this opportunity, but it's going to make the bar and the threshold so much higher to prove that he did have ineffective assistance through his public defense team.
Yeah, those are great points. Mimi Misty here. Are there limitations to who is going to be able to deliver an impact statement? Is it family members only? Fix, I hate to keep going back to you, but I know you're like all over sort of the big details, but also the minutia of this sentencing. So what about that? Can everyone in each of the victims' families speak? All right, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's reserved for immediate family, and the equivalent, we don't know exactly who might give them or who was offered, but essentially it's the equivalent of those who were reserved seats by Judge Hipler. And there's a list that was published publicly to the court's website if people want to take a look. I can't remember if it was initials in that case or it was redacted to some extent, but it's intended for immediate family members only. So as one example, the Chapins, it would be his mother and father and also the other two triplets. They would qualify. It won't be anybody else. There might be an exception for maybe a grandparent here or there, as there was in the Vallow Daybell case. But the only other two I can think of would be the two surviving roommates. Judge Hipler said very early in, I consider them victims of this situation, including the burglary, which Bryan Kohberger is also pleaded guilty to and will receive a maximum of 10-year sentence on top of the consecutive life sentences he's anticipated to receive. But beyond that, we're not anticipating anybody else. But one thing I will mention, because people are asking, what is tomorrow going to look like? There's no time limit. There's no time limit on victim impact statements.
Is there a chance this goes to
Yes.
spills over to us? There's a chance that it could spill over.
Well, they have time reserved for Thursday as well.
Yeah. And that's, by the way, why I'm taking a red eye Thursday and not an early flight. So I'm going to be here if it goes to a second day. And you know what? I fully support the families getting out. Look, if Steve Gonzalez wants to get up there and talk for 5 hours, he has every right. And he should. And we'll see. And maybe it's going to be someone that none of us are expecting to spend a lot of time, either speaking to Bryan Kohberger or about him or just about the victims. It's going to be interesting, by the way, Troy Lambert, to see if they actually address him, because most people, and you sort of know this as a person who writes about protagonists in murder stories, but it's going to be interesting, Troy, to see if they address Bryan Kohberger. The profilers and psychologists I spoke to said the worst thing you can do to him is ignore him or talk about how he screwed up the crime. So what are you expecting from these families in terms of the impact statements?
Well, it's hard to predict simply because it depends on that individual's family's reaction. But if they're thinking about what they can do, I've worked with a woman who survived a serial killer and helped her tell her story. And it was really fascinating because her thing was to say to him, "You have no control over me," was the only way she addressed him, and talk about how he screwed up. And that really, because these guys have such egos, that's a real blow to them. But the other thing is just to ignore them, to address the court and don't even look at the guy. But I don't know that, like Steve, will have the ability to do that. I think if I were in his case, I would just want to rant in that guy, in Kohberger's face. It'd be really difficult to control myself in that situation, I think, if it was my child that died. So it's hard to say, but I think there'll probably be some of them that have read and understand and studied, the best thing you can do to this guy is either ignore him or talk about how horribly he screwed up and just destroy his ego. And that would be more of the tactic that I think I would take. But it really depends. Victims' fathers and daughters. I know with my daughters, I would be so overprotective. I'd want to jump over the bench and beat the guy, but you can't do that. So you have to do that verbally, something along that line.
Well, it has been done before. I hope it doesn't happen tomorrow. But if it were to happen, I can't really fault somebody because I would want to do the exact same thing. But Gemma, to you, we heard one of the last motions that was basically denied, and Ann Taylor, love her or hate her, I guess, was doing what you need to do as a defense attorney, which is just, stir doubt and file every imaginable motion, which is what she did. But among the last was an alternate suspect theory. And you can't just go and say, Dave and Bill did it. You can't just say that. You've got to have some evidence. So it was shot down, but we're learning a little bit more. I was reading a story that basically they were going to point the finger, the defense, at 3 unnamed individuals who are still unnamed, who were connected socially to one or more of the victims. And we were just talking about this guy, Jack Showalter. The defense here literally, to get their client off, could have really ruined the lives of 3 other people in the process. What do you think of that?
Well, first off, I want to say something about public defenders, because I honestly think they don't get enough credit. I think there's this idea that they're not good attorneys. I think public defenders are some of the best attorneys around, especially when it comes to criminal law. This is what they do every single day. They are in court every single day. They know more about criminal court than probably any private attorney. They also know the judges better because they're in front of these judges every single day. And it is a constitutional right that we all have to have legal counsel. These public defenders don't make a ton of money. They do this because they want to uphold the Constitution. So I just want to make that really clear. I think that, as you said, love or hate Ann Thompson, she's a public defender, and that's a calling to do that kind of work. And her job is to throw everything at the wall. With that said, it's never the defense's responsibility to prove that someone did not commit the crime. That's on the prosecutors, right? That is the burden of the prosecutors. It's not the burden of the defense. So, as you said, I do think that when you are going to try to name other people, that's a big thing. And when this story broke, and I think we probably read the same story, that they were going to try to do this, no wonder Judge Hipler said, absolutely not, you can't do this. Also, whomever these 3 unnamed people are, Hipler also said they've already been investigated. So we know that they weren't there. So he wasn't saying you can't say that someone else could have done this, but these specific people have already been ruled out. So I think he made the right decision in that hearing to not allow that. But I also think it is a public defender's job to defend this individual. They could have just said, look, he didn't do it. He wasn't there. There was other blood DNA that was found in the house that was never even tested. How do we know that whatever that DNA is wasn't someone else who had done it?
I'm just taking a couple of notes for myself because there are a few more things I want to get through, and then I promise we'll get some final thoughts. And I think the COE pulled a little clip of the tour that we had today of the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, which I will do. I'll show you in a moment. But Ann Taylor's job was to save his life, and she succeeded. Fix, one of the things that people are sort of shocked at, particularly profilers and people who study this for a living, is how this could possibly have been his first murder or set of murders. You know more about this than me, Fix, but I think is there still a pending case in Pennsylvania, the death of a woman that has not been solved, that could potentially be linked back, or has everything been investigated thoroughly as far as you know, as it relates to Bryan?
Yeah, in the early days, they of course looked around the regions. So they looked at unsolved perceived murders, let's call them homicides, in the Washington, Oregon, Idaho area, and then also in Pennsylvania. And nothing was determined that he had any affiliation with any of that. So I don't know the specific Pennsylvania homicide you're referencing, but there's no tie to Bryan Kohberger of any kind that I've ever heard or that's been substantiated.
Yeah, and Troy, I mean, to you, the guy that writes fictional books, but also deals in reality. I mean, can you wrap your head around the fact that he savagely, and we heard from Steve Gonzalez this week about how he beat Kaylee's head, which I know is hard to just to fathom, but I can't believe that this would be his first set of murders, but apparently it is. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, all of these guys start somewhere. And I agree with Fix in that there at the beginning there were people that said there was a missing woman in Washington. They said maybe that's related, but none of that was directly tied to him. The other thing is that he made the kind of mistakes that a first-time murderer would make, And I mean that it sounds, like there's an amateur and a professional league, but there sort of is, And so I think it is plausible to believe this because I think he made some mistakes that somebody that had done this before and made those mistakes and yet somehow managed to not get caught would not have made those same mistakes again. I think he was thrown off in ways that somebody that had that hardened experience that comes when you've done this repeatedly would not have made. They would have been calmer, more rational, and also able to just not do things like return to the scene of the crime, regardless of whether you think you might have left something there. Don't go back anywhere near there. That's just one of the most foolish things that anybody who's read enough mystery fiction would know. Don't do that. Right. So I think there's some things that, like I say, I'm surprised. The one thing I'm surprised by is like how much he studied that he made the mistakes that he did. So I would think that it's very plausible this is the first time, and he just simply was arrogant enough to think he was going to be better at it than he actually is. He made, exactly like the commenter says, he made what I'd call rookie mistakes. And I mean, I know it sounds terrible, like he's going to go up to the big leagues, but I mean, that's actually, criminals get better at what they do by practice and by doing it, not by thinking about it or studying it. So I think it's very plausible it was his first kill, and I'm very happy that we caught him at this particular point.
Yeah, I agree. I think he would have for sure done it again, which is really crazy. If you missed it last night, I had the former Pullman, Washington police chief, which is where Kohberger was studying, and he's the one that thought there was something off and did not allow him to have an internship within law enforcement. Gemma, Fix, before I get back to Gemma, everyone's asking, the start time is 9 a.m. Mountain Time, which is 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll go with that, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be on Surviving the Survivor all day tomorrow. We're taking it live. If anyone speaks before, after, in the middle, for whatever reason, we're taking that. If there's a lunch break, I'll be there. Hopefully I will get in. I'm going to get up at way before the crack of dawn to get in line this morning to get in there, just to be a witness to history. A couple other questions, Gemma, to you.
One note, real quick, Joel, on that, on the timing. I'll just share with this. The plea hearing started about 15 minutes late. So if you're staring at the live stream screen and it's not activating, and you're hitting your computer or your old TV set or whatever it is, just stay patient and it'll activate. Security was incredibly tight. We had to have our bags searched multiple times. No water bottles of any kind. There were 10 bailiffs in the courtroom. So yeah, we can anticipate that or more. And so it is possible.
Hold on. Why no water? We're not
water bottles. You don't want to throw them.
Oh, is
yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
And are we allowed? Are you allowed to bring your computer and cell phone in?
You can bring your cell phone in. You cannot use it, but yes, you can bring a computer and you can live. I'll call it X posting. I guess we would refer to it now, tweeting. You can't tweet on a phone. You have to tweet on a laptop. I guess you could use your phone, but we're talking logistics for Joel now. But
Yeah.
yes, but it has to be in your lap. You can't bring it up because you're not allowed to take any photos or anything.
Yeah. By the way, my next to prison, my biggest fear in the world is getting yelled at by a judge, particularly on, the biggest sentencing day in the United States in a very, very long time. But
Yeah, don't make your
here
Idaho
is
debut that way, Joel.
yeah, exactly. I'm gonna play a clip. COE, you play the clips. I don't know what you have here. This was a tour, and we're gonna be putting together a story. The COE will be up probably all night as well, putting this together for you. These are some of the shots we got today at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, otherwise known as IMSI. COE, you can play whichever one. I'm not sure which one to play here. So this is, I'll talk over this. This is just the nothingness where it exists. It is the high desert here. This is horrible shooting by me, by the way. That's not edited, but this is the front gate to the prison. And we will get you an edit. That's it, COE? Why are you pulling that? I have no idea. I see this one. Let me, this is obvious. This is a cool shot. This is just a still shot. This is for the transport. Every time Bryan Kohberger is going to be moved around with inside the IMSI, he's going to be shackled, feet and hands, and these are the waist shackles. And then you've got this here. This is, you'll see, that's a basketball back there. These are the rec cages. This is where Bryan Kohberger is kind of proud of this shot, COE. Being that I have shaky hands and don't know how to shoot, I was not a one-man bander like the COE, but we're going to put together a whole, I've got many minutes of different types of shots, but this is where potentially Bryan Kohberger will go maybe 2-3 times a week into one of these cages. I don't know that he plays basketball, and he will stretch his legs. So this is just giving you a little bit of a glimpse into this frightening institution. We were not allowed to obviously film inmates. If you see that orange little like buoy thing, you can see some inmates' heads from a distance in the window. But if you see that orange thing, it looks like a sandbag. That's what it is. They were explaining that inmates like to flood their cells to make trouble. And so that particular cell has some sandbags in front. And while we were there, they were fishing. They were throwing notes around. I did ask, do they know Bryan Kohberger? And they told me not only do they know who Bryan Kohberger is, they know what year he was born. They know where he went to school. They know everything about him. And a lot of them are sort of chomping at the bit for him to get in there. And we did see the guy who runs the car, as they say, in prison. He was holding court in one of these cell blocks. He is basically kind of the captain of the inmate team in the particular block. And he was out there. They pointed him out to us. We couldn't film him. He was a very scary looking individual. Let's just put it that way. And he's a known gang leader, but he runs that car within the prison. And the warden told us that he was holding court right there to show the warden that he is still the man who has all the power in that particular car. So the psychology, what goes on in prison, and even to listen to people like the warden talk about, it's kind of like the analogy that Gemma was making with the analogy I'm about to make, but what Gemma was saying about the judge. The judge oversees the courtroom, but he really doesn't have that much control. And I'll make the analogy with the warden. He oversees the prison, tries to make sure everything runs correctly, but he doesn't have the control you think he has. It's a lot of these gangbangers that are really kind of running the show. And these are the people that Bryan Kohberger is going to have to deal with head on. So that is pretty scary. This is some stuff that the COE put together. Again, these are the grounds leading into the prison. This is the entrance here on Daring Road, which is a daring name. And this is where this dude is going to spend his eternity on earth, at least in there. I always mention their names. I haven't done it tonight. You've got Kaylee Gonzalez, Xander Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, who was a triplet, and of course, Maddie Mogan, a best friend of Kaylee. They're the true victims here. I think the COE's got a photo of them. I believe there was one other thing I wanted to get to. I don't know what that is now. So, Troy Lambert, your final thoughts heading into sentencing tomorrow. I mean, you're looking for a motive, but what else are you, I guess, hoping to see tomorrow? I don't want to use the word looking forward, because this shouldn't be something that we're excited in that sort of way about, but you want to see justice exacted in that courtroom tomorrow. What are you, I guess, anxious to see tomorrow?
Well, I'm really anxious to see the victim impact statements and see how the families react and what they say to him. Really, the victims' families are more important than him at the moment. He's done for. He's got his plea. He's going away. But I'd love to see what kind of closure they're gonna achieve, if any, by seeing that sentencing and seeing him sentenced tomorrow. I know some of them are not happy with it, and they may not get that closure for a really long time. So
yeah. And Brenda reminded me of what I wanted to ask about that selfie. Gemma, to you, that selfie of him standing outside the shower with a thumbs up on the morning after the murders were committed. When you saw that, I mean, that's got to be one of the creepiest pictures that I have ever seen. What did you think, and your final thoughts going into the sentencing?
I found that picture to be highly disturbing. Just that's for me the only way to describe it is I saw that and it was disturbing. But I think it also said a lot about the fact that we are not seeing a quote unquote normal individual. Going back to my a point earlier as we were talking, he is not right in the mind. I mean, whether he's a sociopath or a psychopath, or I mean, he is not a normal functioning individual. And I think that selfie just made that even more, concrete and solid. But I found it to be incredibly disturbing.
In terms of the sentencing tomorrow, in terms of beyond the sentencing, your final thoughts, I guess, what are you most anxious to find out or see or hear?
I agree with what Troy said. I mean, I think we've all been a bit curious to hear from the families, and it's their opportunity to talk about their loved ones and to sit in front of this individual and be able to express what their lives are like now. I'm also wondering if we will hear from the two surviving victims. Will they speak, or will there be a statement made from them and the impact that this has had on their lives and will continue to have on their lives? I'm also curious to see how Judge Hipler is tomorrow and to see what he has to say when everything is said and done, when all of these victim impact statements have been read. What tone will he take? I think he will be very firm, but will he wax poetic in a way? Will he, take an opportunity to directly speak to Kohberger? So I think there's a lot of things that I'm interested in seeing, as is, everyone who's been paying attention to this.
Well said. Lest you think we are not a global show, we've got Elena coming to us from Spain. We've got the Kingdom of Lesotho here. We've got a lot of bases covered. The man who has been all over the story, 3-time Idaho Reporter of the Year, and the lead investigative reporter for the Idaho Statesman. By the way, when you get into the airport in Boise, someone sent me an email to not pronounce it like a Z, but a soft S, which I'm doing. Boise. Yes.
You're a native now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. When I got out of the plane, first thing I saw, the Idaho Statesman has a store in the airport. So that's pretty cool. And I immediately thought of my friend, Kevin Fixler. Fix, your final thoughts, man. This has got to be strange for you as well. By the way, For those who are new, and there's a lot of new people, we do a live nightly talk show like this covering the biggest criminal cases in the country. If you want to hit that like button and subscribe and tell a friend, that is a huge favor to us. But Vix, this has got to be a strange day for you because it was supposed to be a long, drawn out trial, and now we're getting a sentencing hearing. It's not, the story won't end tomorrow, but what is this day like for you, this moment like for you?
I'll answer you in just one sec. Let's do a little pop quiz, actually, because I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm going to give everybody an Easter egg who stuck around and for the entirety of the show. I was talking with somebody from Bryan Kohberger's past in Pennsylvania, and he attended a school district by the name of Pleasant Valley School District, and he later worked there as a security officer part-time. Now, you mentioned Daring Road, but do you know the name of the road where the prison complex, including IMSI, is located?
Put me on
Gemma?
the spot. I thought it was
the road, like
the
the
road.
actual.
It's Pleasant Valley. It's got to be Pleasant Valley.
It's Pleasant Valley. That's right. It's Pleasant Valley.
It's Pleasant Valley Road.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Pleasant Valley Road. Yeah, then you turn on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Turn on
that's
the
right.
road.
So he's coming full circle to some extent.
Hold on, and
Nice.
Pleasant Valley in PA was where? Pleasant Valley
Pleasant Valley School District.
is where he went to school.
Yeah, in the Poconos. Pleasant
Wow.
Valley Road is, can't make it up.
Well,
Yeah.
Right?
I
So
can
there's
tell
our
you this
Easter egg.
That's
firsthand.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's
there ain't
fantastic.
going to be. Yeah, there's going to be nothing. Yeah, Troy's going to steal that for his next book, but I can tell you this: there ain't going to be nothing pleasant about the IMSI.
there it is.
That is for damn sure.
So, yeah, I mean, it's obviously mixed feelings. I think we got a conclusion, and if I'm writing a book, maybe like Troy, a piece of fiction, it's an unsettling end and does not check all boxes for certain families, and it remains unsettling. And I think we would have learned more perhaps at trial, not necessarily a motive or things like that, but we don't always learn that even at trial, as we know. But it will put a period on this experience for the entire state of Idaho, not just the victims. And I think tomorrow, if it doesn't extend into Thursday, it will be, I think, exhausting. I think it will be emotional. I think it will be difficult for many.
It's just sad. I'm right. Like at the end of the day, it's sad. And even if we have answers, it's so sad, especially as we look at their pictures. It's devastating.
Yeah.
There's a
really
type
is.
of story that we call a modern story, and what it is the story structure. There's really no hero, and the audience's reaction to that is always that we got a conclusion, but at the same time we feel battered, like we got beat up, but we got a conclusion. And I think that's really the way we feel about this. Is like, yeah, we get a conclusion, but does that satisfy me and make me happy? No. I think as the audience, if we were talking in a fictional sense, we really feel battered, and kind of rightfully so. There's nothing that could happen that would be justice for these victims. Nothing. And in fiction, that produces that unsettling feeling in fiction or a film. But in real life, it's a much stronger unsettling feeling. Like there is no justice here. There's nothing. But we get what we're going to get.
Very well said. And I'll just cap that by saying, we cover this Ellen Greenberg story, and people always say to me, who was stabbed 20 times, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing now, but people always say to me, well, why doesn't 2020 or Dateline do it? And to Troy's point, they don't do it because there's no real ending to the story. It's still hanging in the balance, and the case has never been investigated. Here, there is a tragic ending. You've got Ethan, you've got Kaylee, you've got Xana, and you've got Maddie, and I'm with Gemma 1,000%. I mean, these are beautiful, beautiful. Not that matters, but I mean beautiful, not just in looks, but the type of people. By all accounts, they were just great kids, and that's what they really were. They hadn't even entered the prime of their lives, and my father, may he rest in peace, was a psychiatrist. And one of the things, my dad was very unconventional. He did not like to label anybody. And you always hear therapists saying, well, this person's a psychopath or this one. It doesn't matter. You know what Bryan Kohberger is? He's evil. And there is evil in the world, and it exists. And he is the poster child for evil. And whatever is going on in his mind is irrelevant. He's going away forever. But sadly, these lives will never come back. So on that note, love you, America. And I'm thinking of these families tonight. I was going to say justice is coming, but is it really? I don't know. I mean, Steve Gonzalez does not think it is. We just know, again, to Troy's point, that Bryan Kohberger is going away, and there's really no conclusion, which is why this is all as uncomfortable as it feels. And I guess it should be, because that's the normal human reaction. So with that said, love you, America. Thinking of the victims here, and may they get justice in some form. And love you, Boise. Thank you for having me. Love you, Moscow. Guests, stick around 1 second. We'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow. The sentencing hearing starts at 9 local, 11 Eastern. And I might start to go live if I have nothing else to do while I'm online at 3 or 4 in the morning. So you don't know what's going to happen beforehand. Stay tuned to Surviving the Survivor. Guests, stick around 1 second. Have a great night, everybody.